Hi, and thanks for clicking here. So, I am embarking on this path of doing more live videos here, and it is a fascinating process for me, and I hope it will be for you as well. I tend to be really interested in questions that seem to be impossible to answer. So, at least with my brain. But maybe with the help of the piano and with your help, with your attention, with your paying attention, with your curiosity, with our curiosity, we can at least have some enjoyable experiences along the way. I don't know if we'll make any progress on the questions, but who knows, maybe. And the question for today is, why do we seem to, or what is it that keeps us stuck in being stuck? And what I want to do with these explorations is to not try to answer them and to try to explain things, because there's plenty of that. There's a lot of the questions that I'll be asking are questions that we've been asking ourselves for thousands of years. And so it's not so much about trying to come up with the right answer or whatever that might be, but something that can help us to navigate our lives with more ease and more joy and more gratitude and maybe some peace with ourselves. And for me, I have found that in many cases, when I let go of my attachment to trying to find answers, and when I drop into the question, drop into the present moment, it offers a different orientation to the question. And that's easier said than done, of course, especially when we're really not okay with the present. Especially when things in the present really don't look good and they don't feel good and it's not fun, and the last thing you want to do is to stay there. And to have somebody come and say, oh, well, just get into the present. It's like, the present really sucks. The present really sucks. I don't really want to stay here. I want to go somewhere else. And that can be really, really challenging. And it doesn't sound like this either. Sometimes the present sounds like that. It's like really not okay. So what do you do when it's like that? How can we navigate when that's what the present feels like? Well, a friend told me once, really good friend and really good wise friend told me once, told a bunch of us once in a men's group. I think it was in the context of the men's group when I heard him say this, is that when things are like this, there is a level of suffering that's going on that is the thing itself, the stimulus itself, the pain itself. There's that. And then there's also the pain and the suffering that comes from resisting that thing. And so if we're resisting the pain, then there is a level of suffering that's added on to the pain. And I thought that was an interesting point, because that made it possible. It makes it possible to go, well, at least I could let go of my resistance, and that would be a little bit less suffering. I could at least let go of the suffering that I'm adding to it by tightening up or tensing or fighting or saying, not being able to accept the present as it is and wanting to fight the present. And from a rational standpoint, it's like, well, yeah, I mean, and life isn't rational. That's the thing. It's like, but at least I can take the thing that I'm not liking, and at least I can go, okay, well, at least it is. I don't have to like it, but I can let go of at least some of my suffering just by letting it be. And, I've got some stories that I could tell here in this moment about things that happened for me when I let go of my resistance, to like a moment when I was in really deep back pain and I couldn't move, and it was so excruciating. And there was another couple of times when I've had some digestive problems and gallstones and kidney stones that were just excruciatingly painful, and when I was able to let go of it was that kind of pain that it's like, it's not okay to do this for another 3 seconds. It's really not okay to do this for another 3 seconds. This is unbearable, completely unbearable. And and I wasn't going to tell this story, but I won't tell a lot of it, but particularly I'll mention the back pain one. I've had chronic back stuff since I was a teenager, and this was probably in my mid to late 40s, and I had leaned over and thrown my back out and gone to the chiropractor and spent some time, several visits, and I was at the end of one of my visits, and I'd been sort of had the treatment, and I was fine, but then when I went to get up off the table, I couldn't get up, and the chiropractor helped me up to sitting, but then I couldn't stand up. She couldn't help me stand up, and so we called my wife, and she came, and the two of them got on either side of me and got me into the car, in the back seat of the car, and we went home. And I did that thing that I had done, I don't know if this is before or after the gallstone story, which is another time. And on the way home, 10-minute drive or so, I thought that thing. It's like, okay, well, I'm going to at least let go of the suffering part of this. I'm going to see if I can get the suffering down from like a 9 to a 7, just because any relief will be helpful. So I just turned my attention to the pain in my back, and which makes no sense, right? It just makes no sense. But I just turned my attention to focus on the center of the pain itself, and just noticed it, and just felt it, and asked questions like, well, what color is it, and what's the shape of it, and started just getting into a little bit of a curiosity kind of space with it, and just noticing it and watching it. And in the process of noticing it, it changed. And I've never had this thought before. Wow. Wow, so you did help. You did help. I've never thought this before. I've never had this thought before. Which is, this idea from quantum physics that you can't observe something without changing it. I used to think about that a lot as a video producer. Because I was always going into situations with a video camera and trying to record the scene as it is without interrupting it, without changing it. And I pretty soon had to realize that that's impossible. There's no way to go into a scene, a situation, and start watching it, especially with a video camera, without changing it. And I struggled with that for probably a few years into my video production career. And someone along the way said, well, yeah, you'll change it, but people can't be anything other than themselves anyway, so don't worry too much about it. And I was like, yeah, that's it. And so, but I'd never thought about it in terms of this physical, emotional, whatever it is, healing process it's always kind of fascinated me, that you can't observe something without changing it. Well, then in that case, if there's something in the present moment that you're not real crazy about, then pay attention to it, like observe it. That may be the most reliable way to change it, is to pay attention to it. and bring some intentionality to it, and go, like, so in the case of my back, I'll finish that story and then see what, if anything wants to happen after that. So I was in the back seat and I'm turning my attention to the pain in my lower back. And noticed how it did kind of, my relationship to it did shift just by changing my own relationship as my awareness to the pain itself, it changes, because I was now having a different kind of relationship to the back pain, and was just watching that, and like I said, asking things like, what color is it, or what shape is it, and things like that. And over the course of the next few minutes, I don't remember the details right now, because this has been 25 or 30 years now, probably 25 years. But over the course of the next few minutes, the pain really subsided. It got less intense. It got less acute. It got less sharp. And it was still there, but it was much more bearable. It was much more manageable. And we got home, couldn't have been more than 10 or 12 minutes after we left the office, when I couldn't move. And we got home, parked in the driveway, and I opened the door and just got up and walked out. And didn't really have any trouble getting to the house. It wasn't like the pain wasn't there anymore, but it didn't immobilize me anymore. It wasn't completely debilitating, like it had been 10 minutes before that. It was a back pain. What is more tangible and physical, than, and of course, when you really think about it, if it's a muscle that's cramped up and what you've done is you've relaxed it, then of course. But that's easier said than changed, right? And I have another story about a gallstone that passed from this same kind of process. And, it's a little, it's possible to explain that in terms of relaxed muscles. And how many different parts of our lives might actually shift and change if we changed our relationship to the things that are stressing us and the things that are keeping us stuck and keeping us telling the same stories. And like how easy would it be to explain things afterwards? And how easy is it to write off those kinds of explanations as to say, oh yeah, well, you just relaxed and the muscle spasm went away. Yeah. Tell us something we don't already know. Yeah, well, we can know that at some levels of our lives, and that's why it can be easy to, look and see what friends are doing and kind of help them. But then when we are in the midst of our own triggering, and when we're in the midst of our own playing out of whatever ancient patterns we're playing out, it's not quite so easy in those situations, because there's no telling what is keeping different parts of us in shadow and out of our own awareness. It's like we don't know what we don't know. So how can we go where we know we want to go when you don't know what you don't know? And so So that question of what is it that keeps us stuck in being stuck, in some ways is, if we look at why we do that, like I think a lot about the relationship between our individual psychology and the social realm that we live in, and the political realm that we live in. I was a sociologist for several years, and I actually did quantitative statistics, and I built global statistical models trying to understand why there is so much food on the planet, but it's so poorly distributed. Like, what are the different factors that lead to that dynamic? And without getting into that answer either, it became clear that there's a lot of in the political realm, what ends up happening, or at least what it appears to me, is that the social realm is essentially a whole bunch of individuals put together. And then, as a result of a whole bunch of different individuals being in groups and starting to behave in ways that we wouldn't behave if we were just on our own, and when we're in larger and larger groups, we behave in ways that we wouldn't when we're in smaller and smaller groups, or if we were just in the family. There are dynamics that emerge that we don't see at micro levels, and those dynamics wouldn't exist if they didn't exist in us. And so the relationship between our individual beings and our place in a social realm begins to, the more you get in there and start looking at that stuff, the more it becomes clear that there is no place to draw a boundary between self and other. And that there's a lot of ways that these kind of phrases can become a little bit cliche in spiritual circles and in various kind of philosophical circles, that we are reflections of each other, and we're all one, and stuff like that, and that's what it is. And the experience that we have as who we experience ourselves to be, like I'm having this experience that I'm the only one here, that I'm talking to a camera, this is a piano, it's like there are things that may not be, that may be illusory in some sort of ultimate sense, but from a standpoint of what it is to actually be, truthful about the experience that we're having as humans, is to at least accept the idea or the experience that we're having that we're separate, that if I did this with a knife, it would hurt and it would bleed, and it's like there's some aspects of this reality, even if it's some sort of an illusory thing. I mean, it's the experience that we're having. So the way I've always thought of that is like, well, this is just the game that God has given us to play for the time being, and it's like, play this game. And you can't just sort of say, well, this is just a game, and then just sort of, you can, and that's actually what we can do is to go, well, this is just a game. But from the standpoint of like, how can we how can we make sense of this from a logical and rational standpoint, so that we can actually deal with this game more effectively, and we can deal with it more successfully, with more grace and more ease, and so that maybe we can get out of being stuck. Maybe we can get out of being stuck. Maybe we can bring more consciousness to the table. And so this idea that there is no boundary between self and other is kind of scary from one standpoint, because there are things that Daniel, need to do to take care of Daniel, so that I can keep food on the table and a roof over my head. It's pretty cold out there, and there's a lot of people who are not in that situation, and there's a lot of challenge coming up because of winter, and there's a lot of challenge coming up because of where they live. If I lived in Ukraine, or if I lived in Russia, or if I lived in Gaza, or if I lived in Jerusalem, if I lived in if I lived back in Texas, I would be living a different life than I'm living now. And part of the liberation of realizing that there is no separation between, there's no place to draw a boundary between self and other, it opens up the possibility of allowing not just to be frightened for having to be exposed to dangers or suffering that maybe we have protected ourselves from, but rather, or it's your choice, it's our choice to decide what to do with that reality, like what to do with like, how have I been stuck, and how does that dynamic, in the ways that I have been stuck, how does that relate to the fact that I've been trying to protect myself? Like, how has that not only contributed to me being stuck in my life, just trying to protect myself, but how has that maybe even contributed in ways that I couldn't possibly imagine to the political dynamic that we find ourselves in? What if I had taken a different path when I was 22 and done different things? How might that have contributed to a completely different political dynamic? I mean, you don't have to get too what's the word, fantastical, to just think in your own life about things that have happened in your life, and one tiny little thing, like you just happened to go to the grocery store at a particular time and you saw a particular person, and that led to a long-term friendship, or maybe it even led to a great love that you experienced, or maybe it led to a really unpleasant experience. How many times have tiny little things in your life sent you off in a completely different direction? Like literally a completely different direction. I'm sure that whoever you are listening to this, you can think of things like that in your life. So if life can change on a dime, because you've experienced that, like how your life has changed on a dime. And how many dimes do we run across in our day? much less a life. How many times could life change dramatically? We don't know. The answer to all of these things that I'm bringing up is that we don't know. We don't know, and by stepping into that place of not knowing, and not knowing what to do with this idea that there's no boundary between self and other, like allow ourselves to just let that simmer a little bit, like let that be a little bit. Like, I don't know how many, there may be nobody watching this. I don't know. I don't even have the comments thing. There's a comments thing around here somewhere. I could monitor that, but I don't know. I have no idea who may be watching this, but it's possible. Let's see here. Let's turn that back on. It's possible that somebody in Europe, it's possible that somebody in Ukraine could be watching me talk here, which is ludicrous. It's just ridiculous. And I was talking with my brother the other day about the changes that we've seen in our lives. I'm in my mid-60s. My brother's in his mid-70s. And, we were joking the other day. It's like, yeah, I remember when I was a teenager thinking, well, what else could be invented? Seems like everything's been invented. Like, what else could be invented? It's like everything's been thought of. And our grandmother, two of our grandparents lived to be almost 100. Our grandmother lived to be 100, and she was raised by her grandparents. So my brother and I know a person in our lives. We knew her pretty well. We knew her for many years. She lived to 100, and she was raised, and her values were formed and molded by people who were born in like the 1830s, 1840s. Their values were formed. Our values were formed. My values were formed in part by my grandmother's values, and her values were formed by people whose values were formed before the Civil War. It's just like three levels of influence there. And set aside her grandparents and her parents, my grandmother, was born in the early 1890s. This is before flight. This is before electricity. My dad grew up in a home without running water. My dad grew up in a home without running water. A lot of your parents probably grew up in homes without running water. You may not have running water right now. And yet I'm sitting here at my piano in my living room, and I'm talking and improvising some stuff on a piano, and you may be watching this from somewhere completely around the world. That's just crazy. It's just it's a way of expressing this idea that there is literally no way to draw a border between self and other. When I was in grad school, I have a master's in applied social research, and I had a social psych class, and one of the things that they said in that class was that everything you think is something that you learned from the outside. Everything you think came from something that you learned. So this idea that I think for myself. Well, that is an experience that I have, and the things that I think, the way that I think, the patterns that I have in my thinking, the data that I have to think with, came from somewhere else. It came from outside of Daniel. Daniel is bringing his own somethingness to it. He's bringing his own DNA, his own ways in which his emotions respond to thoughts. He's bringing in his own ways in which his tolerance for pain affects the way he navigates. So there's a lot of individuality. In fact, the thing that makes us unique is the way that we perceive the world. That's an idea that I got a few years ago from a cellular biologist and epigeneticist. This guy named Bruce Lipton, check him out. From a cellular point of view, the only thing that makes us separate from each other from a cellular point of view is the way we perceive the world. There are these receptor cells around our cell walls that take in data from the environment and send in signals to the inside of the cell so that the cell can respond in the way that cells need to respond in response to the environment. And those receptor proteins, and maybe the combinations of them, the actual mixture of them on each of our cell walls and so on, whatever that is. I'm not sure what it is that makes them unique, but when you aggregate all those together, that becomes how we perceive the world. It's like the way that I perceive the world is apparently completely unique to me. And that, from a cellular biological standpoint, is the only thing that makes me separate from others, is the way I perceive the world. And that's the way that makes you unique. That's the thing that makes you unique, is how you perceive the world. And so that is your unique and precious gift to offer, is what you perceive. That's the gift that you have to offer. So that brings me back around to this thing about being stuck. And it's like, what if the thing that has kept me stuck is this idea that I have to protect myself, and that in the in the separating myself off from others, that's keeping me from sharing the unique and precious gift that I have to offer, which is the thing that could help the external world be more of a reflection of what I would like it to look like, more peaceful, more compassionate, more musical, more harmonious. Like, we don't really know what could be possible if we relaxed into the present moment, whatever it is. Maybe if the present moment is challenging, maybe if the present moment is hard, maybe the thing that we most want to do is to just get through it. And to know that that this too shall pass, and that if we can really pay attention in the moment and really let it be what it is, even if it's to like really just listen in and just notice it and listen to it and pay attention to it, knowing that we can't observe anything without causing it to change, without being part of the change that will happen as a result of that new dynamic of paying attention in the moment to the present and loving it and being with it and changing it because of the magic and the grace and the power of your presence and nothing else, just the power of your presence. So if you are watching this, I'm deeply grateful for that. I hope that this has been a gift to you in some way or other. And I would ask you to write a comment in the comment section below, just something that occurs to you about this. Maybe share a little bit of your presence, share a little bit of your gratitude for whatever it is that you're grateful for, or something that you noticed, or some new thought that may have been inspired by this little time here. If you would click on the like button and the subscribe, that'll help to convince the cyber codes out there to share this message a little bit more widely with somebody else. And I would love to hear and read your thoughts in the comments below. So blessings on your day and on your path forward. And may we find our way through and find ways to move through stuckness into liberated, joyful playfulness. All right, take care.